Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another mystery. You know how this works. We take your fascinating obsessions and, well, we get obsessed right alongside you.
And this time, we're tackling a big one. Literally, mountains of material about the Joker. It's impressive.
Yeah, you weren't kidding about the research rabbit hole you went down. Comics, movies, psychological analysis, even philosophy found its way in there.
Had to. It's the Joker we're talking about.
Great.
Chaos personified, right? You can't separate the philosophy from the mayhem.
Speaking of chaos, let's talk about the Joker's origin story. Or should I say, the lack thereof. You flagged in your notes how many sources dance around this. It's almost like nailing jelly to a wall.
Exactly. And that's intentional. A huge part of what makes him so unsettling. Most villains. Clear motives, revenge, power, what have you. The Joker, he's a walking enigma, thrives on the unknown, mirroring that whole multiple choice past he throws around.
You included that quote, by the way, and honestly, after reading through everything you sent, it's not just a throwaway line, is it? It's like a mission statement.
100%. He's chaos embodied. Why would his past be straightforward? It's unsettling, makes you question everything.
And then there's the Killing Joke backstory, the failed comedian angle.
Which even he casts doubt on. It's like he wants us to question everything, even the official versions of his past. Adds another layer to the mystery, doesn't it?
Layers upon layers, just like a good onion, or maybe a bad onion in this case. But before we get lost in the sauce, you also included a lot about the Red Hood, and that feels important, even if the specifics are always shifting. It's like trying to follow a recipe where ingredients keep changing, you know? One minute it's vinegar, the next it's like glitter glue.
And yet somehow it still makes this disturbing kind of sense for the Joker.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, glitter glue, why not? But
Yeah.
You're right, the Red Hood keeps popping up, and it's more than just a fashion choice.
Definitely. You included this one analysis of recurring motifs in villain origin stories, and it really stuck with me. It's like the Red Hood is this liminal space, right? He's not the Joker yet, but he's not whoever he was before either.
Precisely. It's the transition point, the descent into chaos made manifest. We may not know the specifics of his past, but that doesn't really matter. The Red Hood tells us what we need to know, that this isn't just a guy who snapped one day. It was a process, a transformation.
And speaking of transformations, can we talk about that visual, the Ace Chemicals incident? Listener, close your eyes for a sec. I know you can picture it. That bleached white skin, the green hair, that grin.
It's iconic.
Yeah.
And you know what always gets me? It's not just the look, it's of visceral, you know? Like you can practically feel the chemicals burning, the sanity dissolving.
Totally. And it ties into that psychology article you flagged, the one about trauma and physical manifestation. It's like his insides are now his outsides, and you can't look away.
Absolutely. And that's the genius of it, right?
Yeah.
It's not SCTLE, this transformation. It's a physical representation of everything he's become.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you highlighted this other source about catalyst moments in comics.
Yeah.
And for the Joker, it's not just the chemicals, is it? It's the timing, the encounter.
With Batman. Don't forget Batman. It's like the universe threw all these ingredients into a pot, the past, the Red Hood, the chemicals, and then bam, Batman shows up, the embodiment of order and justice.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. That's the catalyst, the moment the Joker as we know him is truly born. It's like two sides of a coin, forever linked from that point on.
Ooh, two sides of the same coin. Now that feels like a perfect segue.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to save it because we're out of time for this part of our deep dive. But don't worry, we're coming right back at you. Two sides of the same coin, huh? I like that. It's like you can't have one without the other, right?
Exactly. This is a fascinating duality. You were smart to include those sources on archetypes, especially ones on nemesis figures in mythology.
Yeah.
Because that's what Batman and the Jokers are, right? These larger-than-life figures eternally locked in opposition.
Totally. And it's not just that they're opposites, it's that they need each other in a weird way. Like the Joker wouldn't be who he is without Batman to bounce off of, right?
Absolutely. It goes beyond needing an opponent. The Joker sees something in Batman. Remember, we've been talking about nihilism, the belief that nothing really matters. Well, Batman is the embodiment of the opposite. He clings to order, to meaning, even in the face of chaos.
Oh, so you're saying that's what fascinates the Joker.
Exactly. He wants to break Batman to prove that even the most dedicated crusader will eventually succumb to the absurdity of it all.
Okay, yeah. Now I get why you highlighted that part from The Dark Knight where Joker says, "You complete me." Chilling, right. But in context, it's not just villainous banter, it's deeper.
It's practically a mission statement. He needs Batman around to validate his whole worldview, which makes their relationship kind of tragic in a twisted way.
And that brings us to another complex relationship, Harley Quinn. Talk about getting lost in the funhouse mirrors.
It's easy to get swept up in the aesthetic of it all, right? But you were smart to include those articles on toxic relationships and codependency, because that's what's at the heart of their dynamic, isn't it? The Joker's chaos, it's infectious.
You brought up earlier how even his origin story is like multiple choice, but Harley's is well documented. She was his psychiatrist, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, and he still twisted her up in his chaos.
Proof that it's not just an act, a performance. The Joker's chaos has very real, very devastating consequences.
Which I guess brings us to the big question, the one we always seem to circle back to with these villains. Is the Joker really insane?
Right. It's such an easy label, isn't it? But the sources you included on this, the distinctions between clinical insanity and more philosophical madness, that's where things get interesting.
Because if he is clinically insane, then it's like, well, the puzzle solved was also kind of a letdown, isn't it?
Exactly. But if he's choosing this,
Yeah.
embracing chaos as a philosophy, that's more terrifying and way more interesting to unpack.
Which he kind of does in The Killing Joke, doesn't he? When he says, I went crazy, why aren't you laughing? He knows he's not normal, but it's like he's daring us to judge him for it.
And that's the brilliance of this character. All the sources you gathered point to that. The Joker forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, to question our own perceptions of sanity and chaos.
So where does that leave you as the listeners who just took this wild ride through the Joker's psyche? I think it comes down to this. Understanding the Joker isn't about finding the right answer, because there probably isn't one. It's about embracing the mystery, the contradictions, maybe even acknowledging that sometimes the most fascinating puzzles are the ones we can never fully solve.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Sometimes the chaos is the point.